were Britain's most critically successful films of the period, the Ealing Comedies. Full of dark, satirical humour, they won awards, were hugely influential and showcased some wonderful actors, including, of course, the incredible, versatile Alec Guinness.
Perhaps the richest vein of your film career, although you might not agree, was the Ealing Comedies.
Well, I was very lucky over that. Sir Michael Balkan sent me, and Robert Hamer, with whom I became great friends, sent me the script of Kind Hearts and Coronets, just as I was going away on holiday, asking me if I would play 4 parts in it. And I read it on a beach in France, and I collapsed with laughter on the first page and didn't even bother to get to the end of the script. I went straight back to the hotel and sent a telegram saying, why 4 parts, why not 8?
The SPCK have provided us with a large number of copies of the good book, translated into Matabele. But as none of the natives can read even their own language...
You speak Matabele yourself?
Not as a native.
It would be most interesting to hear a sample of the language.
I'm afraid my Matabele is a little rusty.
Oh, come, my lord. Daniel, cast into the lion's den, for example.
This is a colloquial rendering, of course.
Most interesting.
Another Ealing comedy, greatly underestimated, I think, was Man in the White Suit.
Well, I thought that was a marvelous film. I thought Stanley Mackendrick did a wonderful job on that. I remember being very angry at a notice coming out saying that it was an ignoble film because the suit disintegrated at the end and people jeered and laughed. And I thought they totally missed the point of the whole thing. And I thought it was very original and amusing to look at, and a kind of classic of its time.
Because this was about a man who'd invented an indestructible
material, yes. You know, so a cloth wouldn't ever wear out.
Of course, the other Ealing comedy that everybody remembers is The Lady Killers. How do you think that one stands out? 1955.
I don't know. I haven't seen that. That was Sandy Mackendrick again. I would have thought, all right. I don't know.
Let's have a look at a bit of it anyway.
Mrs. Wilberforce?
Yes?
I understand you have rooms to let.
Oh, the rooms, yes. Won't you come in, please?
Thank you. My name is Marcus.
How do you do, Mr. Marcus?
Professor Marcus.
Oh, how do you do, Professor? Yes, I have two right there. Yes. Would you excuse me a moment while I put this away, please? I'm afraid it's quite impossible to make it hang evenly, Professor Marcus, because of the subsidence.
subsident?
From the bombing. None of the pictures will.
You have no other lodgers.
Oh, no, the upper floors are no longer structurally sound. But the 2 rooms at the rear, they're quite all right.
Then you live here all alone?
Yes. I think I should tell you, Professor, I'm unable to provide breakfast or early morning tea. This is the sitting room, and the bedroom is just down here. These rooms do need an airing, don't they? I'm afraid there's no proper service, and the view is, well...
Most exhilarating.
One year before The Lady Killers, British cinema audiences had been queuing in their hundreds to see a comedy film that was so successful it would spawn 6 sequels and a long-running TV series. It turned Dirk Bogarde, a relatively unknown actor with serious aspirations, into one of the biggest stars of the 1950s.
You moved to a very successful series of films, which were the Doctor films. When you were working in what many people might consider unremarkable cinema, were you striving to do your best within those circumstances, or were you not all that conscious that it was unremarkable cinema?
Now look here, let's get one thing absolutely straight. All I've ever been in the cinema, or in the theatre, or in my books, is an entertainer. Nothing more and nothing less. That's all I am. And anything I do to the depths of my gut. I would never, as I said, cheat anyone. I never considered those films as crappy or stupid or whatever they were. They were there to pleasure people. They were there to pleasure people who came to see us. You don't betray that faith. You don't betray people who have staggered miles in a snowstorm or something to get to the movie to see you. You do everything you can. And people met and married in movies that I made. They dated. A whole world. I have 3 or 4 generations of people that I am directly responsible to. I couldn't possibly say that I did anything more than do the best of, the best thing I could do, the highest point of my ability, and never once to look down on it. I couldn't do. But and I loved the cinema too much anyway. That was another thing. It was growing. When I found that a crew was working, and that was working, and that was working, and how it worked, and this was working, the boom. Then gradually all these wonderful things it came in, and I was being taken in again into a force, like I had been in the army, and producing something at the end of it. But I was very, very proud of those films. I mean, some of them were rubbish, I admit. But people like rubbish, you know. People don't want always to be educated, illuminating.
Hurry along there. Now, come on, hurry along. Hold tight, please.
But in the Doctor films, I said, whatever I do, I've got to be a doctor, because the one thing you must never do, coming back to it again, cut it out if you don't want it, don't cheat an audience, and I never did. I was never funny in the Doctor films.
No, you weren't comical.
They think I was funny. Audiences think I was funny. But the people around me were funny. But I was always real, so that when I had to deliver a baby or take out a tooth or whatever it was, you believed in it. It was the hard core of the movie. It was Simon Sparrow.
Morning, sister.
Morning, Sir Lancelot.
Everything ready?
All ready, sir.
Splendid. Now, you just lie still, old fellow. I've just got to discuss your case with these young doctors here. Take his pajamas off, sister. You, examine his abdomen. Take that grubby fist away. The first rule of diagnosis, gentlemen, eyes first and most, hands next and least, and tongue not at all. Look! Have you looked?
Yes, sir.
See anything?
No, sir.
Very good, carry on. Gently, man, gently, you're not making bread. Don't forget, to be a successful surgeon, you need the eye of a hawk, the heart of a lion, and the hands of a lady. You found it?
Yes, sir.
Well, what is it?
A lump.
Well, what do you make of it? Is it kidney? Is it spleen? Is it liver? Is it dangerous? No, don't worry, my good man. You won't understand our medical talk. You, what are we going to do about it? Cut it out, man. Cut it out. And where shall we make the incision? Nothing like large enough. Keyhole surgery. Damnable. Couldn't see anything. Like this. Now, don't worry. This is nothing whatever to do with you. Now, you. When we've cut through the skin, what's the first substance we shall find?
Subcutaneous fat, sir.
Quite right. And then we come across the surgeon's worst enemy, which is what? Speak up, man! Blood, you numbskull! You cut a patient, he bleeds until the processes of nature form a clot and stop it. This interval is known scientifically as the bleeding time. You, what's the bleeding time?
10 past 10, sir.
A classic line. And James Robertson Justice proved to be so popular playing the demanding surgeon Sir Lancelot Spratt, he ended up appearing in all 7 of the Doctor film series.
Now, it has been said of you that you're an actor who doesn't need to play a part, because the parts you're cast for you very often resemble physically, and that in fact you play along with your own personality. Now, how much is that true?
Well, I would like to suggest that the answer is that if one behaves absolutely as one does in private life in front of the screen, it would come over far too vague. In other words, there must be a conscious effort to underplay a part, even if you are more or less doing it as you would do it yourself. It still must be brought down a bit, otherwise it'd be overpowering.
So that you're really underplaying your own personality?
I hope so.
Even in a character like Sir Lancelot Pratt, the Doctor of the Doctor series, the surgeon.
Lancelot Spratt, if you don't mind. Well, yes, he was, of course, founded on somebody that I knew very well, who was also a great ornithologist and a great surgeon, and used to, he had a wonderful team in the operating theatre at the hospital, of which he was a very senior surgeon, and they were all quite used to him, but he had a nervous habit of using the most terrible language all the time he was operating. But everyone was quite used to this and knew that it meant nothing. It was just a nervous thing. And I know a lot of people remember him if I use the word snorker. And I won't mention his real name, but that will bring back memories to a great number of people.
Of course, nurses, doctors, and matrons were also exploited to comic effect in Britain's most enduring comedy series, the Carry On films. With a popular cast delivering more than double the normal share of double entendres, their saucy postcard humour lasted for a total of 31 films. And in 1970, the BBC turned up on the set of number 19, Carry On Up the Jungle.
Well, our films really started, as you say, by accident. We had a script given to us of an army comedy, which nobody else seemed to want. And Peter Rogers and myself decided it would make a funny picture. So we knocked it into shape, and the distributors liked the picture but didn't like the title. So they changed it in conference to Carry On Sergeant.
All right, turn around. Now, breathe deeply. In, out. Say 99.
99. Something's wrong, eh?
Congratulations. You have a perfect heart and lungs.
What? No, Doctor. My heart hangs by a thread.
By a rope, my boy.
Rope? What do you mean? He doesn't understand. My heart...
Lie down.
Oh! Oh!
Good. How's that? Remarkable. Stand up. Stand still. Cough. Aha.
Ah, you see.
Fantastic.
What is?
Stomach's a model. You've got a digestive system like an incinerator.
I went and saw Carry On Camping in Blackpool one afternoon. I was up there for a summer season. I've never heard anything like it. First of all, you couldn't get into the cinema. You just couldn't. I just happened to know the manager, and I went and stood at the back. But I've never heard such laughter.
You the owner of this site?
No.
Where is he?
Gone for a pee.
Oh.
Here he comes now.
Well, we've basically tried to make broad, bawdy, if you like, even vulgar humour, which has a family appeal, and which at the same time never actually takes the mickey out of the institution, but only the people in it. We don't want to make people frightened of hospitals and policemen and firemen, but we don't mind taking the fun out of the actual policemen themselves.
The lovely thing really is that in the carry-ons you get a chance to sort of play all sorts of roles, you know, which is great fun.
Well, I've played a hell of a lot of different roles, but they're all me, with different hats on.
These pictures are so successful and a big hit in Japan, and they had to queue up in Los Angeles and in India, believe it or not.
The lovely thing with the carry-ons is, of course, it's like coming back to school after the holidays, because you know the people that you're working with, and as you get to know them, of course, your timing becomes that much tighter. And there's just a very happy atmosphere.
I always feel sorry for a newcomer because he feels strange, because it is really like coming into somebody's family. But we've never ever had any trouble with newcomers, really, because we just belt them.
Joe Thomas, our director, is as responsible as anybody for the success of the films. He's directed them all. He keeps us in order, quite rightly. We have to do what we're told. And we discuss everything together as friends would. And he's got firm hand over the controls.
No, the competition is murder. You just got to look after yourself. I just make a habit of sort of playing against the others. And because I'm not strictly a comic. I'm not a comic at all. These other blokes are comedians. I'm more of a sort of reactor. So I let them do it, and then I throw a couple of counter punches. That's all I can do.
Our scriptwriter, Talbot Rothwell, has an enormous fund of gags. I think he has the Victorian gag book at home. And, you know, basically our pictures are of the same format, with the same people, different locales and different incidents that happen. But basically it is a formula which the public expect.
Wordplay and period costume also featured heavily in the films of another comedy gang who entered the world of cinema in the 1970s. But where the Carry On films were dismissed by most critics, the Monty Python films received rave reviews, give or take the odd religious controversy. Their first foray into the cinema was The Holy Grail, starring Graham Chapman as King Arthur and co-directed by Python's two Terrys, Gilliam and Jones.
How do two people who've never directed a film before in their lives direct a film?
Well, I don't know. We're really learning as we do it. That's what's nice. We've been given a whole feature film to learn how to make films on.
They're pretty good. Yes, they're pretty good. They're both very visually orientated. They're very aware of picture composition and so forth.
Ingmar Bergman's going to be jealous of this one.
And there's a slight joke about us that we make about them, that the jokes tend to be a bit secondary to whether it looks good, you know. So we keep sort of, when they say more smoke, and this kind of thing, because we've hardly had a shot yet when we haven't had smoke or some artificial effect. We tend to ask them how many laughs there are in the smoke, you know, just to keep them, as it were, thinking of that. But that's the only criticism I've made.
Up with the cow as high as you can to start with.
You've got your questions ready.
I know I've got my questions ready. Which of these questions would you most not like to answer?
The first couple of days, we just sort of leaped into it, and immediately, I mean, we'd first of all chosen an impossible location. It was about a half a mile up Glen Coe, so everything had to be humped by Sherpas up the mountain. We got up there, the very first shot of the film, the big moment, the camera turns and it jammed. So we didn't have a sound camera, and all our great leg plans were suddenly up in the air. And we panicked, and we just had to try to get a film made suddenly on the spot. We had this incredible location, no camera, and no experience. That's the worst thing.
Where's the other Terry now?
He's directing the film.
Charlie, you come to this mark there, to where Suko is. Suko even further over.
No, we do tag team directing.
Can you give me a brief synopsis of the film? Is that possible in the space of half an hour or so?
Well, I don't think it is, really. I don't think it is.
Well, try in then 30 seconds.
Right. It's about a search for the Holy Grail, see, which is a large sort of creature, a bit like a dodo, with a big beak. And people are trying to find this Grail.
Do they?
No. No.
Isn't that rather a letdown? Don't you feel
It's
the audience...
a big letdown. The whole film is a great anticlimax.
John, apart from being interviewed by Film Night, what are the real horrors of filmmaking on location?
Apart from the interviews, well, there's the sheer discomfort, the sheer...
Am I too
physical...
heavy?
No,
I'm
no,
not
that's
too...
fine.
Okay.
No, move up a little bit. That's better. That's better.
How do you prevent boredom from creeping in?
Whoa, I don't really. Boredom creeps in daily. We sit in our renter van, you know, and think what we could be doing if we weren't making films.
After the last of the Python films, John Cleese scored a huge international hit with his 1988 comedy, A Fish Called Wanda, also featuring Michael Palin. Its director was the then 78-year-old Charles Crichton, who Cleese chose specifically because decades before he had directed Ealing Comedies, The Man in the White Suit and The Titfield Thunderbolt.
That's the tradition that I come from, the Ealing Comedies. Those are the ones I loved when I was a kid. And to make one in that vein, but with that slightly black edge, which I really personally prefer in comedy, I call it wickedness, you know. It's, please don't take it seriously, you know, it's all pretend. But I love that real edge to the comedy.
A Fish Called Wanda turned out to be Britain's biggest international comedy film for years, until 1994, when the world fell head over heels in love with a floppy-haired posh boy and his amorous misadventures.
I assumed that we'd completely fouled it up, and certainly I mean, I never watched any rushes until the last day, when Mike Newell came up to me at lunchtime and said, "Come along, and we're showing some rough assembly, and, you know, you've got nothing to lose now. There's only one afternoon's work left." So I went along, and I sat there with about 50, well, more, about 100 of cast and crew watching this thing, and there wasn't a laugh in it. You know, in the months that followed, I really thought I was going to have to emigrate.
Making a film is less than half of the process. You know, it's the way you distribute it that's going to make or break it. And I was very keen that the film opened in America first, and I thought if it could come into the UK with some good reviews from the States, people would sit up and take note.
When we all flew over to America to first screen the movie, we had absolutely zero expectation that we would get one laugh at all in the audience.
They were very worried, both sides of the Atlantic, that I was there top of the bill and totally unknown, really.
Hi, we've got precisely 30 seconds to make this little commercial for a new comedy called Four Weddings and a Funeral, starring the absolutely fabulous Andy McDowell.
Hi.
We've only got 30 seconds because we spent absolutely every last penny on making the film as excellent and as funny as possible, and I think it is pretty funny. What do you think, Andy?
Yes.
So this is the last 30 seconds of film that we have in the camera, so I'll stop rabbiting on because I'm just some git with stupid hair who you've never heard of, and Andy's this fabulous goddess, and every time she opens her mouth, it's heaven. So I'll shut up and over to Andy to tell you everything you need to know about Four Weddings and a Funeral. A really funny film, I think. But don't take my word for it. Take Andy's.
Well, it's like...
Well, after Four Weddings, I was in despair and unemployed for a few months, and then suddenly the film started to do incredibly well in America. There are British things which export particularly well, and I think humour is one, and I think what they call heritage is another. Not that this is a period film, but I think they like the flowers and the quintessential Englishness of it. That for some reason Americans seem to find that very droll. I've discovered that in my travels in America now, that you've only really got to say gosh or, by Jiminy to get a huge laugh.
Oh no, another wedding invitation.
I've gone from being semi-failure actor to, lots and lots and lots of jobs. I mean, to the point of absurdity where now, even totally unsuitable scripts about 70-year-old Irish nuns, people say, well, Hugh Grant could play that. It's bloody frightening because you just feel huge pressure. And I miss very much the old days when one was just doing a kind of supporting part, and if you were good, it was a bonus, and if you weren't, it didn't really matter. And equally, if the film was a success, then that was a bonus, but if it wasn't, it was art, so it didn't matter.
Four Weddings, Bridget Jones, The Full Monty, these are some of the biggest British hits of recent cinema history. But we're going back to the 60s for our final film, Funny Man. To some, Peter Sellers is the greatest comedian Britain has ever produced. He broke new ground in radio with The Goons, appeared with Alec Guinness in The Ladykillers, and starred in comedy classics like Dr. Strangelove and I'm All Right, Jack. And then, of course, there were the hugely successful Pink Panther series, and possibly his greatest creation, Inspector Jacques Clouseau.
Peter, where does the character of Clouseau come from? Is it observation, or are you digging about inside yourself to find aspects of him?
No, it's difficult to say about it now because, I've been doing it so long. Come from, I think, when I first did the Pink Panther in Rome years ago, he was just a straightforward French detective. In fact, as a matter of fact, Peter Ustinov was playing the role at that time. And I was going to go into Topkapi with Jules Dassin. I successfully talked my way out of that in an interview at the Dorchester. And Peter left the film because of some problems. We crossed over. He went into Topkapi as the taxi driver, and I went into this. And it worked out great for us both. But getting back to that, let's think now. I don't know. We just decided to make him one of those very serious. I mean, the size of his moustache is to give him, in his own mind, some masculinity, And a very serious but completely hopeless at his job. Very serious detective, but completely bad at it, useless at it,
But he's kind of vaguely etched in, isn't he? We don't really know very much about him, except that he's a detective and he lives with this Japanese whom he keeps fighting.
Yes.
But presumably you know more about him than that in order to portray him.
Well, I know that he goes to this lunatic, let's say, disguisologist who sells him these terrible disguises. He's a very romantic man. He tries very hard with the women, but he obviously doesn't make it with them too much, although he probably will in the next one. He believes sincerely, as I was just saying, that he's probably one of the greatest living detectives in the world. And also, on top of it, the sad thing is that he knows deep down that he isn't. But he doesn't want anyone else to know it,
I believe everything, and I believe nothing. I suspect everyone, and I suspect no one. I gather the facts, examine the clues, and before you know it, the case is solved. Oh yes, there is much here that does not meet the eye. That is quite obvious. What is that you said? Nothing, monsieur. All right. You can go now. Yes, monsieur. But do not try to leave. Everyone in this household is under suspicion. Yes, monsieur.
The humour in the Pink Panther films is rather similar, isn't it, to the Goon Show zany humour?
Well, I think all humour has something in common, but...
I see what you mean.
Yeah, that's the hard my man I know, I come down,
So how similar is the brand of zany comedy in the Return of the Pink Panther?
Well, it's pretty wild, you know. We're doing some mad things in this. We're telling taxi drivers to follow that car and they get out and run after. Things like that and all kinds of other mad things. I don't think it has a direct affinity with goon humour, no. But it's pretty wild.
That Clouseau is timeless because he represents something in all of us that doesn't change, essentially. Certain customs may change, but the essential man doesn't change. Clouseau doesn't. That the fallible, bumbling screw-up, if you will. He's essential in all of us, and he provides us with the ability to laugh at ourselves.
Right, here we go. Right, action,
Talking about Blake Edwards and yourself, you seem to have some sort of rapport. What is it that exists between you and...
Rather like Laurel and Hardy that way. We seem to... Well, we know, you know, his sense of humour is very much like mine. He finds the same sort of things as I do funny. Little dogs and cats and birds, and things and like that, you know. Animals from the rear, all kinds of things like that funny. Situations, he spots them very quickly. We both see the funny, and he's also a great giggler. It's great working with him.
What do you think this special rapport is that you and Peter Sellers seem to have?
We're both crazy.
Peter Sellers' influence is still clear today, with stars like Steve Coogan and Sacha Baron Cohen describing him as a major influence. And as for Sellers himself, well, one of his biggest influences was the man we started off with, George Formby, proving that good comedy is handed down through the generations.
Turned out nice again, didn't it? 1, 2, 3, Now I go cleaning windows to earn an honest bob. For a nosy Parker, it's an interesting job. Now it's a job that just suits me. A window cleaner you would be if you could see what I can see when I'm cleaning windows. Honeymooning couples too. You should see them bill and coo. You'd be surprised the things they do when I'm cleaning windows. In my profession I work hard, but I'll never stop. Climb this blinking ladder till I get right to the top. The blushing bride, she looks divine. The bridegroom, he is doing fine. I'd rather have his job than mine when I'm cleaning windows.